Last week in Michigan politics, over 8 months after charges were announced against people alleged to have been fake GOP electors in Michigan's 2020 election, some have yet to see their preliminary hearings. We explore why it may have taken this long. Plus, we break down what the federal government is doing in an effort to combat so-called forever chemicals in our water. And controversy in Ottawa County over a move that some say may hurt the health department's ability to respond to emergencies. We hear from both sides of the issue. I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on Your Side Rundown. And we start with continuing coverage on the people accused of posing as fake electors in Michigan to help Donald Trump in the 2020 election. The Attorney General announced charges over 8 months ago, and yet hearings to decide whether they'll stand trial are still ongoing. We went over the cases and spoke to a legal expert to get a sense of why it seems to be taking so long. Roughly 8 months after Attorney General Dana Nessel announced charges against 16 people who allegedly acted as fake GOP electors during the 2020 election, the courts are continuing to move the process along, hearing from witnesses in some of those cases earlier this year.
We could tell on it that it was not an actual or an authorized certificate of votes. It was not an authorized certificate of votes. It was a fake.
15 defendants now remain, as one had the charges against them dropped as part of a deal with prosecutors. But some still have yet to see a preliminary hearing meant to determine whether a defendant will go to trial. The judge in the cases in January moved that hearing for some of the defendants to later this month due to what she described as the complexity and volume of evidence. However, she denied a separate request to pause one of the defendants' cases until transcripts could be obtained from other defendants' hearings held in February.
I'm not going to bind the court's time up so that we can try. We're already inundated with requests for transcripts, and I can already tell you that this one is something that has to be farmed out to someone to assist us because of the volume of court time that we spent.
But even if former President Donald Trump becomes president again, a president is not allowed to pardon people for state crimes. So why might defenses look to pause further in these kinds of cases?
They want to get as much discovery as they possibly can before they are required to go to the preliminary hearing stage.
Jeff Schwartz is a professor at Cooley Law School. He said given what's been seen already, if the defendants do end up going to trial, he thinks it's likely it would be several more months before they begin.
Absent some sort of intervening fact, you're probably looking at 6-8 months before you go to trial after the preliminary hearing.
But with the upcoming presidential election threatening to cast a shadow over these cases, Schwartz said should they go to trial and the courts not want to try them during the election, that could further alter the timeline.
If it's not tried within, I would say, the next 5 months or so, you're probably looking at after the November election.
In Ottawa County, the County Board of Commissioners voted this week to move nearly $2.5 million combined from the public health and child care funds to its general fund. 13 on Your Side was at that meeting. We explain how commissioners voted and the reaction from people who live there. While last year's budget feuds between the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners and county health leadership may have come to an end, funds for public health in the county were once again in the spotlight at the board meeting on Tuesday. The board voting to move nearly $2.5 million from the public health and child care funds to the county's general fund.
So as we prepare for our fiscal year 2025 budget, getting some of these steps in place.
The dollars that were moved were excess funds that had not been used already. Because requests need to be made from departments to access money from the general fund, the move is seen by some as a way to increase transparency and good accounting.
I think it's really important for transparency that we go ahead and proceed on these two amounts that have been identified as being much higher than they should be sitting in a fund. so that when it comes to budget season, it's very clear what the county is doing and that the public can understand that.
Others, however, feel the move may make it harder for the health department to respond to emergencies without immediate access to that money. When we reached out to the health department for comment, Deputy Health Officer Marcia Mansaray, who also spoke during the meeting, said hers was more of a neutral response, but not without concerns.
In the past, it's been a comfort to have. I'm concerned that when we need it, we might not be able to get access no matter where it is.
The chairman asserting, however, that the county is in a good position to respond to any potential emergencies.
I guess it's worth mentioning is also very rigorous and extensive emergency planning set up. So if there are any emergencies, the county is ready to respond and does so whenever is necessary.
But some also felt a new policy for excess department funds should be made, and that this transfer shouldn't have happened until one was in place.
I understand that this can, we can respond, but it seems to me that we're just putting the cart before the horse. And I don't see any reason why we can't wait with this allocation until we come up with a policy.
A policy the county's fiscal services director says is now in the works. And also in Ottawa County, the county's former administrator, John Gibbs, is suing the County Board of Commissioners and its chairman. In the lawsuit, Gibbs alleges that he was retaliated against by the board, terminated without cause, and defamed by Chairman Joe Moss. Gibbs says Moss defamed him about a week before he was fired when Moss posted a letter of complaints against Gibbs on Facebook. Gibbs is asking for severance pay and monetary damages consistent with his employment agreement and possible lost wages. And now to the federal government's plan to address water worries in Michigan and across the country. The Environmental Protection Agency announced a new rule this week mandating a first ever national standard for the presence of so-called forever chemicals, often referred to as PFAS. The chemicals have contaminated water wells across the state and have been linked to many illnesses. The state has nearly 300 sites it is actively monitoring, including many in our area. Here are some of the counties with the most sites, with Kent County topping the list, followed by Muskegon, Kalamazoo, Allegan, and Ottawa counties. 13 on your side's Jeremiah Brown takes a closer look at the new rules and talked to a woman from the Rockford area living with the fallout from forever chemicals.
Yeah, I learned about this in 2017. My husband had passed the year before of liver cancer, and it was the next year that I learned that my groundwater was contaminated with some of the highest rates of drinking water that have been seen.
Sandy Winstelt lives across the street from the former Wolverine Worldwide dump site in Belmont, where capping and waste relocation is now taking place. Her groundwater has been contaminated with PFAS that had been dumped decades ago, and she has been in the fight for tougher PFAS regulations since 2017.
It seems so, weird to me that this was never regulated. How did we have an environmental protection agency that never protected the environment? It was only reacting.
The EPA announcing nationwide regulations limiting the amount of 6 kinds of PFAS in drinking water. The new acceptable maximum for the 2 most dangerous is now 4 parts per trillion.
But because it's a forever chemical, it doesn't go anywhere. And in fact, it tends to move into our water, which we have to drink. The problems with this is that it's also bioaccumulative, so it doesn't leave us.
Since the 1940s, the chemicals have been used in everyday items, such as nonstick cookware, stain-resistant clothing, and firefighting foam for repelling oil, water, and resisting heat, but is also linked to causing cancer and other illnesses. The EPA says the new regulations are expected to reduce PFAS exposure for 100 million people.
If you go to your state and local and federal officials with a problem and asking for specific things to be done over time, it can have quite an impact. So it really does give me hope.
And Governor Whitmer signed a bill last week that could bring extra revenue to Kent County and the city of Grand Rapids through taxing hotel stays. House Bill 5408 lays the groundwork for Grand Rapids to levy a 2% tax on hotel stays. The bill also paves the way for Kent County to raise current 5% tax rates on hotels and motels up to 8%. The tax revenue could go toward projects like the new amphitheater downtown and the proposed soccer stadium. Approval by voters will be needed for both Kent County and the city of Grand Rapids to levy these new and additional taxes. The proposals could show up on the ballot as soon as Michigan's August primary election. A demolition will soon begin on buildings at the location of the $184 million Acrisure Amphitheater coming to Grand Rapids. Multiple permit applications have been filed by the city for the Market Avenue project. The submissions cover the demolition and soil erosion permits for that amphitheater. The work could start as soon as May 1st. The 12,000-seat venue is expected to generate a $490 million economic impact over the next 30 years. Muskegon Public Schools is set to receive a $2 million grant from the federal government to expand the district's career exploration programming for students and adults. The grant money was secured by U.S. Senator Gary Peters through the bipartisan government funding bill for the 2024 fiscal year. The district plans to use the money to open a first-of-its-kind career exploration center on the soon-to-open Charles Hackley Middle School campus. The Career Exploration Center will serve students in grades 6 through 10 to be more prepared for careers after school. The district is also planning on partnering with local union education facilities to create realistic experiences for students. The $2 million grant will also be used in part to create similar programming for adults. The new Career Exploration Center will be debuted to the public on May 2nd at 5:15 p.m. New poll data shows a growing number of Michigan voters would like to see a so-called working parents tax cut. This would give households that already receive the earned income tax credit a significant tax cut. The goal is to combat rising prices families are facing with a tax break to help families make ends meet, with many saying current government programs are not enough.
While government programs are critical today, we are only helping 30,000 children through the current child subsidy. This proposal is the only way to get to scale. Suddenly, being able to help 250,000 children in 1 year alone. The ripple effect for this is incredible.
The think tank behind the tax cut, Michigan Future Incorporated, says the policy would help the parents of more than 250,000 children. And at the state capitol, if you've been to the Capitol building in Lansing in the last few months, you may have noticed a lot of construction going on in the Capitol Dome. That construction is meant to restore the surfaces and artwork that line the inside of the dome. We got an inside look at the project, not currently available to the public, and bring you the details of the stories behind the art. With its collection of hand-painted surfaces, eloquent architecture, and breathtaking works of art, the Michigan State Capitol is a place that not only holds the seat of state government, but inspires a sense of pride for people like Barb Thamudo.
We are unique in the fact that we have 9 acres of hand-painted surfaces in the building. There's really nothing in this Capitol that hasn't been painted by an artist's brush.
But with its beauty does come a need for upkeep.
Because of all of that decorative paint, it's constant maintenance.
More than 150 feet in the air at its highest, this is the first scaffolding in the Capitol Rotunda since 1992, allowing workers to restore surfaces that had gone untouched for decades.
We are just wrapping up. We're really pleased with the end result. It should be done we're actually next week going to start dismantling the scaffold. So it's moving right along. We're ahead of schedule, so we're very pleased with that as well.
As they plan to wind down the project, we got a close-up look, a chance to see the art from just feet away. But aside from their detail stands the stories that make the art and this project important to many.
Our allegories, or sometimes referred to as muses, are women that are symbols of things important to the state of Michigan when we did the construction of the Capitol. So they represent things like art, agriculture, law, science, justice, industry, shipping, and education.
Even for those of us who have a little problem with heights, the stories of the Capitol and its art are set to continue to inspire. And that's the rundown for your week in Michigan politics. Be sure to keep up with all the top political stories of the day, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. We'll see you next week.